is the first day I've been actually able to sit up in about 4 or 5 days.
Oh, great. You had
I've
a
even
neck.
had a Yeah, I've even had a, a bath today because
Oh,
I can stand up in the bathroom long enough to have a shower.
oh, perfect. That's great.
But it's not finished yet, but at least I can sit up and I can do so joyfully. So I'm
Oh,
really
good.
glad to be able to talk with you
Oh,
about
me
this.
too.
Okay,
Awesome.
so Scott, the story that we've had so far that we can review to catch everybody up is that you had been practicing Anapanasati somewhat successfully until you got yourself into a really, really good state, something that like you've never had before. Okay, that would be like either in the neighborhood or actually in the first jhana. Guess what? You keep practicing, even that state will become ordinary. Think about it like that. The very best that you can come up with, you can have it just about all the time until it too becomes ordinary. But then it didn't. It would be very, very special because it was short lived.
Short-lived. Yeah.
Yeah, it was short lived. So you finally get the skill to get into that state, but then you didn't have the skill to maintain it. And so that's what we're talking about now is that you've already started learning to develop the skill of getting into a really good state. How do we begin to sustain that? And a really good way of understanding that is to I want to understand this. We could bring some psychology in. And the psychology that I bring in actually has very strong roots in neuroscience. And this comes out of behavioral psychology right back to Freud. In fact, Freud developed the concept of id, superego, and ego. Have you ever heard of that three-way combination? Okay.
Yeah.
So it's actually a good descriptive way to talk about what's happening in the mind. The Buddha didn't use that particular example, but he sure did note the pieces well. Okay. That basically Eric Berne made it much more comprehensible by relabeling it parent, adult, and child, except that they still didn't get it exactly understood well. So the parent is actually the place in the way that we store all of our concepts, including the concept like if you don't work, you don't eat, or you've got to work. If you don't work, everything is going to go to hell.
Yeah.
Okay. Guess what? People who don't work generally wind up more of in a heaven than they do in a hell. That in fact, one of the jokes about Christianity is Christianity itself needs hell.
Yeah. Yeah.
Without hell, Christianity don't work. Well, guess what? Without the hell
Uh,
of work, our society doesn't work.
True.
Okay, except that then it would turn into a heaven, not into a hell. The hell is the work that we're doing needlessly. That you could just hang out all the time. I hang out. That's all I do is hang out.
But doesn't someone have to work? I mean, we.
Uh, actually, let's not get into the logistics of it. Let us say that when you start applying your mind well through your own wisdom, you will find the solution to that. And we might be able to work through a few things. But let's tie back to the issue of that's the rule that brought you to a crash landing. That was your hell. Just thinking about, oh no, I've gotten now a text message saying that my work is now postponed because of yet another issue with coronavirus. Look how much benefit there has been to a number of people. And I'm not talking about the very wealthy who have certainly benefited from coronavirus, but not so many airplanes in the air means that the earth has well survived, having less pollution going up. The oil industry crashed. They didn't like that, right? But there was, let us say, cost and benefits in many, many different ways. And if you learn how to play that music and dance that step, you can wind up sidestepping the hell instead of stepping right in it like you did.
Yeah, yeah,
Okay.
it definitely wasn't as bad as it seems. Like a day later, looking back, like it's really not that big of a deal. And there's solutions. It's just a moment of crisis. You can't think about it like clearly, you know.
Except that let's keep that moment of crisis for just a moment. Okay. And go back to the point that it's the concepts of the rules or all of the stories that we've been told since childhood, all the lies about society and how society expects things of us, winds up in this thing called the superego. And that it actually is instinctually based. And the instinct is the instinct of the herding, the nesting, or the socialization instinct, the kind of things that cats have in some ways and not in others. And so cats are seem aloof because they don't want to associate. And so they do want to associate, and then they're all over you.
Yeah.
Okay. So this is the nesting instinct, and part of the nesting instinct is that there are certain rules that apply to the nest. And one of the rules, like for instance, at a level of the example of the 14-year-old girl is getting dressed to go out on the weekend night, and your dad says, "No, you can't." Excuse me. and dad says, "No, you can't go out." And she says, "Yes, I am going to go out." And he says, "No, you don't. You live here. This is my house. I make the rules, and you cannot go out." Okay. This happens how many times? Several times in every girl's life, and at least one big time in every young man's life. Okay. Which means that we are rebelling against the rules, but these rules have been laid down and laid down and laid down and laid down and passed down one generation after another over and over and over again, building up our society. And we need to become aware of the oppressive rulemaking that we have, which basically is another way of looking at what kind of bars or what kind of standards do we keep making for ourselves that we either jump over too easily or fail to jump over at all. Okay, so the rule of if you don't work, you don't eat comes up. Then there is a part of you that is not the superego or the parent, but the child that responds to that with, "Oh no, what's to become of me?" The little child inside. Now, at this point in time, a wise meditator will wake up to that little dialogue and say, "Aha, I see that pattern going on right now. I see that immediate raise of fear. And guess what? COVID is not going to last. Everything is going to be okay right now, and I do not have to follow the rules." So we can begin to twist that around into from the critical mind of, "Oh no, you don't work, you don't eat," into the nurturing mind of, "Yes, you can handle that. No problems here," and go right back into the very practice of the meditation that got you into the state that you just crash landed back out of. And you can do that within 10 seconds. And that would be called to be able to sustain that first jump. And so this is what then we're talking about in the sense of sustaining it. The language is used of guarding the mind, that we guard the mind with the kind of thoughts like, "Oh, you don't work, you don't eat," to see that those are unwholesome thoughts because those kind of thoughts are conceptualized, looking at things over a long period of time, and all we're doing is just feeling good right now. Just feeling good right now. Never mind what COVID does. We don't know what the future is going to bring. All we know is there's no reason to crash land into fear. No reason at all to crash land into fear. We can pull a parachute, and that parachute is wait a minute, slow down. You don't have to crash land.
And I don't want to be superstitious here, but I did end up relaxing, right? And I did end up coming back into some sort of peace. Maybe not, it wasn't as rapturous as the previous day, but back
Well,
into
you
just,
lost a lot of altitude all of a sudden. Never mind, you can float back up there.
yeah. But
But you got to
my work,
practice pulling those parachutes before you crash land.
yeah, yeah. But my
So
work ended up,
congratulations, then.
yeah,
That's what we're talking about. Let's make these events, not that you were on such a great high, because we're expecting that kind of event to happen. Let's talk
yeah,
about what kind of crash landing did you have afterwards? Because everybody has that high, and then everybody has that crash landing.
yeah,
Funny that.
yeah, definitely.
And it's generally this dialogue of, oh, you've gone too high and you're breaking the rules now. You've gone too far. You've got to suffer the consequences.
Yeah, that's what I was thinking. Like I'm like, there's no way I can feel this good. I have to be punished. Like, like
Yeah, that's
yeah,
the hell. You
yeah,
can't stay in heaven and enjoy it. You got to
yeah,
pay, boy.
yeah. Like I was like, oh, I'm gonna pay for this one. This is too good. Like, uh,
Well, in psychology, they have the reference of, I forgot exactly what was the lady's name who came up with this concept of the three P's of protection, permission, and potency. And that this one comes into the realm of protection, that it's okay to feel good and get protected from the crash landings. You get a free parachute. You don't have to talk yourself into feeling bad. And when you start to do that, pull that ripcord so that you can handle this. You can recognize that, hey, uh, I don't have to have those kind of unwholesome thoughts. I can come back and, but you see, what happened was you even used the word later. So that took you a while, that you spent a whole lot of time talking yourself into how bad this crash landing was going to be. But eventually you did pull the parachute. You did, in fact, come out of it.
yeah,
But look at how much altitude you lost, and look also how much into misery you had gone
yeah,
because you didn't wake up sooner.
yeah.
And so that's part of the potency. The potency here has to do with, can you pull the trigger quickly?
Ah,
Can you see that stuff as it pops into the mind and say, wait a minute, we're the meditator here, we're the boss.
so it's like a sport. It's like,
It is. It's actually
yeah,
a sport. I
yeah,
use the word toy, but sure, this is mental sportsmanship, and you've got all the players in the game.
ah,
Okay, all the crap that you've learned in the past is your enemy if you want to play it in that kind of game way, and your job is to turn that enemy into a friend.
ah. I learned how to do this. Here's a metaphor. So my job, I officiate water polo. Have you ever seen a water polo game?
I can imagine it. They're not riding seahorses, I assume.
No, no, no. So it's like they have a ball and it's a cage and they're swimming and they throw it and it's really aggressive sport. It's wrestling and it's grr and it's grr. So
When there's money and other issues on it, sports always become war with rules.
yes, it's war with rules. So my job is to make sure it doesn't get out of hand and become a terrible mess and a just fights and
Why don't you
people.
just let them kill each other? I mean, you're out there in the water, these guys can drown. Go ahead and have a couple. Get it
Yeah,
all into the headlines all over the world.
it happens. Happens a lot.
Referee stands by while two swimmers kill each other over a football.
Yeah, and that happens all the time. But here's the thing: if I can, before it escalates into this
Uh-huh.
big catastrophe, if I can, here's a little. This guy does a little thing. Dude, catch it before it gets out of control. Then everything goes smooth. That's like what you're saying. Is like if you can catch when your thoughts start to go into a bad direction, you're like, hey, I'm not gonna do that. Then you can prevent.
Precisely.
Yeah,
We need a referee in the game to
a
keep
referee.
the proper kind of rules rather
Yeah.
than the rules that are set by the parent ego state are the rules that we've heard from everybody else our whole lives.
Yeah.
Okay, but that's in fact what the child is playing against. And so we need the referee there on the field, and the referee then is the adult ego state. Okay, so we need a manager here, and one of the things that this manager is going to do, this referee in water polo, uh, is to call the parent down when he's critical of the child. And that we're now going to start playing with a level playing field where the job of the parent is to nurture the child. Everything is all right. Everything is fine. Come on, you can do it. Pick yourself up and be successful.
So the parent is like the the thoughts, and the child is like the feelings. Is what you're saying?
Right.
Okay.
So literally, we have talked ourselves through the parent ego state into feeling bad, the child
Right.
ego state, our whole lives. Now it's time for the referee to come in and tell this parent to start nurturing the child, talk about good things, so that you can talk yourself into feeling good for a change. Your choice. And somehow or another, you were never given that choice your whole life until I come along in a happy way and just kind of lay this out. There's actually quite nothing to it. That's why it's all about, you've heard about emptiness and sunyata and all of that kind of stuff. Basically, it's a piece of cake, except that there's no cake.
Simple.
There's
Yeah.
nothing to it. It's that simple.
It's simple. Yeah. That's what I knew. I knew that. Like that's what I could see that.
Okay, so that's the referee. That's what is needed there, is for that mind that is awake. This is what Bodhi or awakening is all about, is to wake up that parent ego state, or excuse me, to wake up that adult state, which is also the observer, the witness, all of the stuff out through philosophy and history that they've talked about. We've all known this kind of stuff, but it's only through the practice of the teaching of the Buddha that we can see how to put the thing together so that we've got a happy, functioning human being.
How do I? My question is, how do I understand this, and at the same time, I have the understanding that there is no individual agent and there is no doer that's separate from reality.
All right. Okay.
Is that?
Well,
Would you say
the
that
whole,
that's true?
within the context of Western Buddhism, anatta is overblown, is highly, highly overrated.
Overrated.
Right, in the sense that it's almost like a straw man for Christianity to shoot at because it can't get the real target.
Oh,
It's almost an irrelevant teaching, but it's become really important. And you could also almost say that it has to do with the concept of that it was intentionally wrongly translated in the first place. Intentionally wrongly translated in the first place. because the word self in English was not a wise choice of the word to translate it into, because there are so many various and different uses in the way that the word even built into the language itself as a demonstration. It's built into the language itself, and I just proved that it's built into the language itself by saying that. Okay, so the word self is not the right way of looking at the word anatta. And the second mistake that's made is that they translate the word anatta back to the Greek to be atomos, or atomos, atomus, or atom, atom. But that word only came into the Greek language at about the time of about the time of the Buddha, about 500 AD. That was when they were really figuring out what was the nature of reality. And they kept, the idea is you keep cutting things and you keep cutting things and you keep cutting things until you get it down to that it's not destructible anymore. So it's not cuttable. You can't whack it in half. This is too small. Okay, you've seen like that with a knife. Sometimes you're trying to split a hair with a knife and you can't because the hair is too small. You cut it sideways. Okay, but you can get a knife and you can hold the hair so that you can cut it. But then you can take half and cut it again, etc. How far can you cut down? And the answer to that is the atom not cuttable. Now, along about 18th century, they came by and they says, oh, we have just discovered what now is known as an atom. Let's call it an atom because we don't know how to distress it. And it didn't take very long at all to find out how to bust an atom. A hydrogen atom is very easy to be separated from its electron. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
So what we can do now is we can go down and even to use the word quantum, because the quantum, like for instance, a photon is a unit packet of energy. It has a quantum. There is also quantum in time, that there is a place where time cannot be, it's so meaningless that it's down to about 10 to the minus 80th of a second. So it's pretty small. But in that time, there's a whole lot of bouncing back and forth. So there is an atom, but that's not what Atma and Atom or Anatta have anything to do with that. After a long explanation, that in fact, you have no doubt heard the name of Mahatma Gandhi. Do you know that Mahatma actually means great soul? Maha'ata.
Okay.
Okay. Actually, the word anatta has to do with a soul, which is different than indivisibility. It has more to do with, and in fact, the word that comes out of the Greek, or the not comes out of the Greek, but because they're similar Indo-European languages, Greek is mostly closely for vocabulary, and Latin is much more closely in structure to the Pali. So that's one. And so if you've had both Latin and Greek, Pali is not going to be that difficult to play with. So the word that we have that we use that you know is the word atmosphere, ATMO, atmos. And the atmosphere is what the Buddha is talking about. Is that because the idea was that the atmosphere itself was alive because it gives life. In other words, the air that we're breathing is conscious itself. And the Buddha was saying, no, the air that you breathe is not conscious, and that consciousness is dependently arising. That you're not conscious all the time. You get hit in the head, or you fall down, or you go to sleep, or you're off in limbo world. There's all kinds of times when we're not conscious. And when we're talking about conscious, we're talking about, yes, but conscious of what? Because consciousness requires an object.
Does it though? But um, so the experience, consciousness, in the way you're defining it, would be like subject object relationship consciousness, right? Like I am conscious. Like there's an I that knows it's conscious, right? So
Except that that's not the case. You're actually repeating Descartes when he says, I can't do it in the Latin, ergo est or something, but I think, therefore I am. He was wrong. He could have said instead correctly, I think, therefore I think I am.
yeah,
But the I am is merely a thought. Me, mine.
yeah.
That's all it
But
is. It's a thought, but there is nothing to it. Literally, it's just a me, or it's a self-preservation mechanism. And a better way of saying it would be an organism uh, preservation mechanism, or an instinct, because that's what it's trying to do, is preserve the organism. The problem with the human is that somehow we've been divided into a crowd, and we're not a unified unit most of the time. We're actually arguing, in doubt, indecision. We lie. We don't like the truth, and we separate ourselves out. Okay, and so this whole quality is what the Buddhists say. No, let's put all of that stuff back together again in a unified whole. Let the organs become an organism so that everything is functioning properly. Okay. Now, how does the human being get themselves into the position of being a crowd? Okay. It's the fact that we were taught as children critical thinking. That in fact, the only other possibility for critical thinking, most people think, is magical thinking. And yet, magical thinking and critical thinking are generally the same thing.
what do you mean?
Well, critical thinking is often used to, oh, you've got to look to see that that magic has got no evidence to it. Okay, so that would
Mm.
be how you can see critical thinking, but that's still observational. It's not necessarily critical thinking. No, critical thinking is when we're saying what it's not and what it is, that we're making judgment calls. We're saying this is good, but this is better, and that's best. We're setting standards. We're setting bars that we ourselves have to cross over. And some of the bars that we set, we can't cross over, and some of them we can. And some of them, those bars are set in the wrong places. Okay. And we get attached to these bars and settings. The Pali word, by the way, is sila bhatta paramasa. You heard the word sila. So sila bhatta paramasa, the the things around that we attach to. These attachments are the superego. The Buddha has a word for the superego. It's just in a completely different language, in a completely different context. And it's one of the fetters, the second fetter.
What is
So
that?
in
No, what's the
you,
word?
sila bhatta
Oh,
paramasa.
okay.
Sila bhatta paramasa, attachment to rites, rules, and rituals, which is meaning all of the stuff that we grew up with as all of the standards and rules and whatnot, that Freud calls the superego, Byrne calls the parent. This is what the Buddha calls it. And it is
So,
normally referenced in the middle cortex or the temporal areas of the brain. And some will put it as part of the reptilian brain. Excuse me. Sorry
So
about
culture.
the reptilian brain is in the back. It's the
Yeah.
mammalian brain, the temporal
Yeah.
lobes. This is where all of the data and all of the concepts and a lot of thinking and processing is carried out,
Right.
lining us up feeling miserable because of the critical thinking, setting
Yeah.
standards, jumping over bars, all of that kind of stuff in the mind. So if we can use the frontal cortex, the wisdom area, to wake up to that process, to say, wait a minute, we don't have to have critical thinking right now. Let's have some nurturing thoughts. And so that's what we're beginning to practice now is nurturing thoughts. And we're beginning to practice means we're waking up the frontal cortex. We're waking up the adult. We're waking up the observer. We're waking up the referee of all things. Hey, ref, it's about time. Show up. We've been having a fight here for years. Let's set some ground rules here. And the ground rule is that you can't use ground rules anymore. You got to take it as it comes in the present moment. That's the new ground rule. Is that every ground rule is suspicious and it needs to be investigated before it's allowed to be a ground rule. And you don't work, you don't eat, just bit you badly. And now
Yeah.
you can see it.
Yeah.
And that's exactly what happens in everybody's mind. How many people do you think have had similar experiences because they feel really, really good for whatever level they are, and then they get something about COVID and now they feel miserable
Yeah.
just in a second or two?
Yeah. I couldn't stop. I was laughing. I couldn't stop laughing. I was just laughing in the park just by myself. They got a text message.
Laughter
Oh,
is infectious and generally healthy.
yeah.
So this is the idea about anatta is not this big whoop-de-doo that has gotten Buddhism all by the throat in Western mentality. There's really nothing much to it. You've probably heard of the three characteristics of
Yeah.
anicca, dukkha, anatta.
Yeah.
That in fact, that's pared way down at a little bit slightly more dense place in Nietzsche. It's Sabe Sankara Anicca. Sabe Sankara Dukkha. And Sabe Dhamma Anatta. So when we look at it from that word, they've actually changed the verb or the substance of it from all things that are compounded, put together. In other words, all the rules, all the ways of things are supposed to be, change. And if there is a self there to try to resist the change, then there's going to be dukkha, because dukkha means dissatisfaction with what? The change. But we don't have to go in the direction of the dukkha. We can go to the direction of anatta. Oh, there's really nothing there.
There's no self to resist.
Right, there's nothing there. There's really nothing much. Or it's just
That's
air.
emptiness.
Yeah, emptiness.
Yeah.
Exactly. All right. That what stands in the way is when the child feels bad about the rules that the parent set down that don't agree with whatever's happening in the moment. The anicca, everything is happening. That's all we have. It's just one event after another, after another, after another at a really, really super fast clip.
I have. What about this one? Um, so you can recognize impermanence, right? You can see change. Everything changes, right?
Uh huh.
So in order
but not at the rate you want it.
what do you mean?
Well, everybody wants change. They want things. They want this, that, and the other
Yeah.
thing. If you don't have it, you want to make it yours, so you want change. Yes, everybody recognizes change. The point about that everything is changing is not the issue. Everybody knows that everything is constantly
Oh,
changing.
yeah. And even if you zoom in, like billions of things are changing every
Hmm.
moment.
Every moment,
Yeah.
every billionth of a moment, billions of things are changing,
Yeah.
all the way down to the quantum level.
Yes. But in order to know things are changing, or even understand things are changing, and or see something is changing, doesn't there have to be something that doesn't change?
Um,
Because if I could see something A changes to B, and I go change from
well,
A to
let us
B,
say this way, that the way that things are interacting with each other are what we could call natural law. An example of that would be lithium itself. Lithium is actually a metal because it's got a valence electron sitting way out there on the outside, easy to give up, and yet it's the lightest metal there is because it's only got like two protons and uh, two neutrons, and that's all it's got, or but maybe even just one neutron and two protons. But anyway, that that's the property of the atom itself. That's an important point. That's why we have lithium batteries, is because of it's the lightest element that is actually a metal that freely gives up an electron. That's it. Now, are you going to go muse as a physicist? No, physicists are not going to muse. They understand the nature of uh, lithium. It's the philosopher that's going to muse about, well, what if the lithium doesn't want to give up its atom to, or its electron today? Okay, that's the kind of questions that you can ask ad infinitum.
mm.
All right.
Oh, 1 second. I gotta grab some water. Okay, go ahead.
All right, that we don't know about fundamental laws of nature. All we can see is what we keep observing over and over and over again, but you need to check it again. This is, in fact, a good and easy introduction into the Eightfold Noble Path in the sense of right noble view. Because most people think that the word view, because of the way that it's translated, ditti, um, is translated as a view, but almost always our views are like worldviews and concepts. Well, this is how I view things. Okay. That's not what we're talking about. That's a different property. We're talking about, in fact, viewing, looking, investigating, noticing again. So rather than having like the philosopher musing over, well, what if lithium doesn't want to give up its electron? He can instead, well, let's look again and see. Well, let's look again and see. Okay, that's the teaching of the Buddha. To let's take a look again and see rather than musing over what it might be. That musing over what it might be is actually magical thinking.
Hmm.
Philosophy itself. I'm
So
much more of
seeing,
a physicist. I'm much more of an engineer. I'm going to
so
keep
seeing,
checking to make sure that that table does stand up on those four legs. I don't trust it until I observe it again. Engineer. That's the way. Okay, so Buddhism is an engineering process. It's not a philosophy. It's not a religion. It's not magical thinking. It's not what must be there. It's what we can observe.
so seeing what's real. right now.
Seeing what's real right now. And you don't
Because
work, you don't eat is not real right now
that's just
because look, I'm not
imagination.
working and I don't have to not eat.
Yeah. Yeah.
Wow, isn't that amazing? That
Yeah.
is actually the permanent rules that are always that which is interfering with the discussion of what's the reality of the moment. And so this is the invitation coming back and back over and over again. We don't have to be critical. And when we are, let's make sure that the criticism that we're using is useful, valuable, and wholesome. So that we can make things a little better rather than just feeling bad about how bad they are. Because things are actually pretty good.
Yeah.
Guess what? Planet Earth's air is so stable that it's still breathable in most places.
Yeah, it's pretty sweet. Nice.
And thanks to COVID, in many places, it's a whole lot easier to breathe.
Oh.
I have heard just in one occasion that Mexico City, for instance, lost, it used to be almost a red bad air day every day, and they got it down to where they had like 100 days in a row of no bad air simply
Oh
because
yeah.
nobody was out driving.
Uh,
So uh, the air is still good to breathe. Take a deep breath and enjoy the life-giving qualities of it. But the Buddha is really big on breathing. Bhikkhu Buddhadasa made a statement that caused a bit of a ruffle in Thailand, but no one could prove him wrong when he
what do you
made the
say?
statement. Again?
Oh, what did he say?
Oh, uh, he said that the Buddha only taught one practice. In English, we can say one meditation. He only taught one practice or one type of meditation, and that's Anapanasati, in and out breathing, mindfulness of taking long, deep breaths in, and mindful of taking long, deep breaths out as we develop other skills. Then, in fact, of the 16 steps of Anapanasati, the first two, you have the word or the verb of to understand or to know, because you already know how to breathe. But all of the others is to train oneself. Like, for instance, gladdening the mind, having happy thoughts. Thus, one trains oneself. And then to feel good, to feel comfortable and solid and uh, satisfied, secure and safe. That's the technical definition of the word sukha, which is actually just the opposite of the word dukkha. So instead of feeling dissatisfied, you literally talk yourself into feeling satisfied.
It's kind of weird that I it's kind of weird to think about how you talk yourself into it, but after I talk myself into it and I was in it, it was just like this is how it's always is. Like there's you don't need to talk like why do you need to talk yourself into it? Like you know what I mean?
But the that's the better question would have been, why have I been spending all of these years talking myself out of
Self
it?
yeah. I guess that's a better question, yeah.
Because then we can see that that's exactly what has been doing. That in fact it's actually talking ourselves back into feeling good should be easy peasy, a piece of cake. Why
Yeah.
is it that we keep going back into fear and loathing and disrespect and all of that? Because we were taught. It is merely a teaching that we have learned and that we've incorporated that teaching into our set of rules and standards.
Because that's how your parents has lived their whole lives. So they just
Precisely.
give it Yeah,
But you can't blame them for your misery because
because that's
look where
their
they got
parents.
it. Yeah, they got it somewhere else. I mean, we
A
humans have been screwed up for a long
long,
time, way back
yeah,
before the Buddha.
long time.
And the Buddha's pointing out this is what you can do is you can just change your mind, change your attitude. And Sati is the number one item on the list. Sati, to wake up. And that the waking up then is to wake up the adult ego state so that we can see this dialogue of criticism. And when we can see that dialogue of criticism, now that we have woken the referee up, the referee is sees that criticism, he can blow the whistle on it. So blowing the whistle would be the gladdening of the mind.
Now, I notice sometimes um, you can do the same process, but almost without the steps of talking yourself into it. Like you can just feel yourself into it. I, sometimes that
They
feels
kind of
that,
go together. They do.
yeah.
Um, the the relax. Actually, a way of thinking about it is that a mind moment is not always and necessarily filled with discursive thought. That
Yeah.
in fact, if the mind was filled with discursive thought 100% of the time, that kind of person would be generally miserable, if not
Hmm.
unresponsive. But in fact, many of the times we're in other senses, hearing, seeing, touching, experiencing the body in many ways like that. So, in fact, what we're saying here with Anapanasati is we're going to spend a whole lot more thought, mind moments looking what the body is doing as it's breathing, which means that we're spending less time in discursive thought. Hmm. So, observing mind moments are different than uh, ratting on oneself mind moments, which are different from the feelings of having been ratted on. Those are also mind moments. The actual feeling of the terror of the child is a thought moment. That if it was always just constant chatter, 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 and nothing but chatter, so what if the child feels terrible? You'd never know it. So you can see that, in fact, the mind is bouncing around back and forth, and bringing the referee onto the field so that we can begin to change the ground rules from, oh no, no work today, I won't eat today. Oh, I've got so much work to do. Oh, it's piling up. Oh, I feel terrible. Into that dialogue, into, hey, another day off.
Yeah.
Another day off. Reminds me of another conversation I had with a student when he was talking about how marvelous he enjoyed his girlfriend, and then she left to go to work or away or to someplace. And now he's thinking about her and pining with her and using what we call in English language, he was missing her, which
Mm.
means that she was providing him with a service and now she's gone and not giving him that service and he's deprived somehow. And so he has to force her to come back so that he can feel good because he can't feel good himself anyway.
Yeah. And
The reality of the situation is that he felt good when she was there. Not everybody feels as good as he did when they're with her, but he talked himself into feeling that good.
yeah.
And so now that she's gone, he can have good thoughts about her. In Thai language, we have the term kit tun kung, which means I've been thinking about you. And that leaves it to I've been thinking really happy thoughts about you, or
Yeah.
I've been thinking miserable thoughts because I'm without you.
Yeah.
Okay, so it's the same thing. So the lady went, she left. Now the guy is in the position of, hey, he can think about her, and remember and reminisce how wonderful it was,
Yeah.
as opposed to feeling like that he misses her, that she's obligated to fulfill his needs.
Yeah. Because that's a recipe for disaster.
Precisely,
Yeah.
precisely. But just, oh no, COVID again today, no work, no eat, is a disaster in its own right.
Yeah. Yeah.
And it's the same process of the mind. It's exactly the same thing in the sense of, at least when we're in a really, really good state and those thoughts come up that give us those negative feelings, we can wake up at that point and say, I see that. I can see what's going on. That in fact, you may not even know it until after you feel bad. But
Yeah.
then you can recollect, the reason I'm feeling so bad is because I thought about work.
Yeah.
And it was the thought feel complex that spiraled me down. In fact, I had a problem with several of them. Thought, feel, thought, feel, thought, feel, thought,
Yeah.
feel.
Yeah.
And now I can wake up.
Yeah.
And all that time we're losing altitude.
Yeah.
So the question is, how soon can you catch that stuff? Wakey, wakey. That's why we're building the quality of sati. Sati, to wake up, to look at what the mind is doing. Because if you can wake up to see what the mind is doing, you have control over it.
Yeah.
The adult in the house is always the one in charge.
I'm in charge. Yeah. Right.
You probably heard the expression that people only use 10% of their mind. This is normally said by
I don't
nerds.
think that's true.
Well,
I
it's
think that's a
certainly
myth.
not. No,
Yeah.
it has a truth of wisdom into it, in the sense that everybody is quite capable of using all of the various qualities of the mind and do so often. They just
Oh
don't
yeah.
happen to use the frontal cortex but about 10% of the time. The rest of the time, they rely on the easier parts of the mind.
Yeah.
In other words, we drive our cars by habit rather than by alert. Imagine how safe a driver would be if every time he took the same path, he was under the impression that I'm on a new road and I really got to pay attention to where I'm going. But no, we get into habit. And so we rely upon the old maps and follow the old maps into disaster. Because the map's not the territory, especially not the maps that you generated when you were 7 and 8 years old.
Yeah. Well, I don't think the habits are. I don't think the habit itself is a bad thing if we have good ones, right? If we can replace. Yeah.
Absolutely. That in fact,
The.
that's the right way to look at it, is that let's take out the unwholesome bad habits and replace them with new ones. And how do we do that? By practice
Yeah.
over and over and over again. So we get into the habit of, that means that the disasters now happen very infrequently. And are not really
Yeah.
all of that much disasters because we're pretty quick at catching this stuff. So yes, we do want to develop wholesome habits. That in fact, you already have quite a number of wholesome habits. When I talk about those, let's just take credit for those. Pat yourself on the back with all those wholesome habits. You might even want to take a 10-minute or maybe 10-hour day and write down all of your good habits if you want to. That's okay. You got tons of them. We're not talking about the good habits. We're talking about the bad habits that cause suffering and dukkha.
Yeah.
And one of them is talking ourselves into feeling bad when all the words is mentioned is COVID, day off.
That's it. Yeah. So stupid.
uh that's wisdom talking. but you didn't see that the first time. So, Scott, this has been a really enjoyable talk. I think that you've gotten somewhere how to practice, about how to be able to sustain these wholesome thoughts. Go back, keep up, enjoy yourself.
Thank you
Go
so
laugh
much.
at the heart.
Yeah, I will. Like crazy man. Okay, bye-bye.
All right. Bye-bye.